All right, we are live. It's a little bit late, but we are here. Welcome, everybody. We got Mike, Faraday Research, and Phil Bouchard with Finite Theory. How are you guys?
Oh, we're doing all right, I guess.
The after party, huh?
Yeah, I guess so. Well, we got the Oilers have to win in overtime for it to be the after party, but until then, Phil, I guess do you want to start off with the share or what you're working on?
Sure. There was an interesting week because, like I was saying last week on Mike's show, I'm part of a mailing list that includes Michael Boyd, Eric Weinstein, Jack Sarfati, and Salvatore Pius. And this week, I thought that I killed it last week, but this week I really destroyed them all. I mean, I really put an end, and nobody is saying anything anymore. Salvatore Pius is like, why are people hating me? You know, it's like he's like he's like, nobody's gonna take my super force away from me. You know, it's pretty funny, but I conclude, I deduce this week. It's very simple. I mean, I wanted to explain the quantum tunneling because Michael Boyd wanted to have a solution for the quantum tunneling because his experiment has to do with quantum tunneling or some sort of a signal going faster than light. And at the same time, I did deduce that the speed of light is a function of frequency. I did deduce that last year because there's a supernova. I forgot the name of the supernova, but the supernova very billions of light years away exploded a long time ago, and we don't receive the colors at the same time. So the photons of different colors are not arriving here exactly at the same time. And I use the mathematics to calculate the Schneider formula or something like that. I use this formula to that calculates the diffraction of light and all that, and the angle of diffraction of light when you have a light beam that goes on that is reflected on a prism. I use this equation to calculate the difference in speed for these cosmological distances of different color, of light of different color. And it's all in my paper. I calculated the delta 12 second, and they observed like a delta 6 seconds, something like that. So I'm very close to the observation using this formula. So I know the speed of light is a function of frequency. So this week I figured that if you lower, I figured regarding the double slit experiment, you know, you have interference, you have constructive interference and destructive interference for the double slit experiment. But what happens to the energy of the photons that are destructed, that are going through the destructive interference, where you have black black stripes of photons. So what happens to this energy, the energy of these photons? Nobody was able to find an answer in the last 100 years. What happens to the energy of a photon after destructive interference? Some people say it was converting into heat or whatever, but what I said, it's kind of linked to the pair production and the pair production and the well, when you hit a positron and an electron together, that creates a photon. There's a name for that. I forgot, but um, it's kind of linked to what I was saying on my show. But um, the um, when you lower the frequency of a photon, the energy is not gonna it has to go somewhere. So what I'm saying is the energy is converted into kinetic energy. So when the photon has a very low frequency, when the photon shifts its frequency into a very low frequency, then the energy is going to be converted into kinetic energy. So it's going to go faster than the speed of light. And I'm going to share the screen
Boom.
here. Yeah, so I'm just going to share my screen one sec. Sorry, my computer is slow right now. Sorry about that. So I started looking around. Can you see my screen? I started
I can see
looking
it.
around, and in March 2025, like 2 months ago, there's a group of researchers that were doing research in cosmology and figured that if you have superluminal dark photons, it would explain the GRB 22109A anomaly. So there you go. A lot of people are already suspected that dark photons exist. Superluminal dark photons. A dark photon is really a photon with very low frequency. So, um, so yeah, there you go. It's very simple. Sorry, I was reading a comment here, but it's very simple. The If you want to to travel faster than C, you just have to shift the frequency of a photon using destructive interference, or you're gonna mimic quantum tunneling right there. So so yeah, I set out to the mailing list and um, on Thursday, and everybody is just stop stop talking. The people, they don't know what to say, but I know I'm right because it makes sense. And so yeah, that's what happened on my side this week. Um, I know there's also a guy. Well, I'm not gonna talk about him too much, but there's a guy who figured that every material has a different acceleration speed. So gravitational acceleration speed. So if you drop material of different types, they're gonna hit the Earth at different time, because he says that there's he didn't say it like that, but it turns out there's the materials, they have a different relative gravitomagnetic permeability, so they're gonna react differently, each of them, to gravity. And yeah, so there was all of this stuff, man. It's all Nobel Prize worthy, you know. We can our group do our little group. We find cool stuff like every month, and you know we're never gonna win the Nobel Prize because
They're not
actually
paying us
it's
billions, right? It's like if they let some average people win, then we'll all get defunded, I think.
yeah, exactly. But it turns out it's false pretense. You know, false pretense in Canada is not legal. They say, oh yeah, fine, refute Einstein and you're gonna win the whole Nobel Prize. And we did it a million times. Our little group did it a million times, and where's the freaking Nobel Prize? You know, it's false pretense. It's criminal, actually.
I agree. It's ridiculous, and there's so many within this group that all deserve it that none of us will ever see it, I don't think. But hopefully, we force it, and we force the paradigm shift, and that there's just so much coming out that they can't stop it, and they're going to be forced to recognize it at some point, right? But until then, it's just frustrating because it really is criminal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's frustrating, but at the same time, that's why I focus on the U.S. Navy right now because in the American cohort, because they just want to get shit done. You know what I mean? They don't care about people's pride. They just want to get things done, and that's all they care about. And I kind of like it. Um, so yeah, that was my little adventure this week. Pretty dense, and I'm gonna have news by the end of the month regarding the cohort I applied to and the peer-reviewed paper that should be processed. That is being processed right now. So I'm gonna know by the end of the month if it's accepted for peer review.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
And at least they're forced to take a look at it.
yeah, but I had to hire a PhD because I can't. You know, there's like there's so many weird things you have to do and not do if you want to paper to be accepted, and you have to know the correct person. You know, it's all politics. It has nothing to do with merit.
Oh, exactly. And that's just like what's going on at the Hadron Collider and hot fusion and the rest of it, and NASA and everything, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's all about who you know. so
Exactly. Joe, feel free to hop on if you want. Mike, you can post the link if you want.
and
Right, but
so yeah,
that's awesome.
so yeah,
Proving
the big picture. So the big picture is I'm able to reasonably easily. Well, I already did the stealth propulsion and already tested the force field, but now I think it's pretty easy to achieve FTL. And my next challenge will be to harness the ambient energy that we are in, like I was talking on my show. By creating a void, we can create a potential. Actually, the opposite of 0 point energy. You know, instead of taking energy from nowhere, you harness the ambient energy we are already in. So that's the big picture, man.
and big enough to quiet both Sarfati and Sal Pius.
Oh,
That's
Yeah,
they don't want to hear it. They go by their own religion, and that's why they haven't really done any science in the last 30 years because the religion's getting too far in front. Too many egos going. You know how it is. You
Yeah,
see it all the time.
they're very prideful, and they don't they're very impolite. Like especially Jack Sorfatti, he insults people all the time. It's like why? It's like he has the emotional maturity of a 5 years old boy, you know.
Yep. It's mine. It's mine.
So he's
It's
trying
that
to
attitude.
intimidate people.
Yeah, and bullying, right?
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, it's bullying. It's they can't swallow their pride when somebody else comes up with a different theory or a better theory that totally trumps what they've been working on for the last 30, 40 years, and they're not about to let some guy come out of the blue till they blow him out of the water, right?
yeah,
I see it all the time. It's unfortunate, but eventually those guys will die off, and then the other guys will take over with the new theories, and then stuff will get done again. But all the old guys that are not willing to uh, let go of their baby and accept a different theory that could be better, they won't do it. They won't swallow their pride.
yeah. And honestly, Jack Sorfatti keeps bragging about having worked for the CIA and some
Oh yeah, it's
remote
about the money too.
vision project for 20 years and the 100 years Starship project. But these projects, they all led to nowhere. I mean, they didn't find anything. 100 years Starship project. They rejected all non mainstream manuscript, including mine. I know because I applied for it. So they said, "Oh, you go again, Einstein, and that's not good." So, but it led to what? What they what did they gain from that? Nothing, you know. So they just wasted taxpayers' money, and he's bragging about that. So it makes
Oh,
no sense.
exactly. And they've been holding science hostage for pretty much 100 years now, and then it's a question of how much is classified, and like, right, that they it,
It's a
they've made discoveries that are blatantly obvious back in the day, and then they
oh
withheld it
god, yeah.
all, and then
Oh
they've put on this fake um reality that they've enclosed us in. And now it's like with quantum technology starting to come forth and superconducting and the rest of it, it's like they're
yeah,
it
we're
doesn't fit within their box. So
Yeah.
are they actually going to, they're going to be forced to have to acknowledge it? But then, like you say, it's like it's all criminal really, because they've been hiding so much, and then when it
of
comes
course
out,
we're
uh
we're we're
happen.
behind 100. Yeah, we're behind 125 years. 125 years of secrets, right? When is it going to stop? Well,
Yeah.
on their
Yeah.
as far as they're concerned, on their watch, that's never going to happen. They're going to always stay at least 100 years or better ahead of us because it's all about, now we're going to get into the conspiracy theory of it all, where it has to do with control and power.
Exactly.
So it
Yeah.
is. It's quite blatant. You don't have to be a PhD to figure that one out. It's very obvious what they're doing.
Yeah,
Very
and
obvious.
so Sarfati is
Sure, he's
kind
a
of
gatekeeper. He's a
insulting
gatekeeper.
people all the time to intimidate and kill the
They're
momentum. You know what I mean?
yeah, they're gatekeepers.
Yeah, exactly.
Gatekeepers to exactly what's going on. It's pretty blatant that they're not going to give it to us on their watch. They never will. So uh,
It's pretty
it's up
blatant
to
that
us to
William,
figure
you
it
got
out.
to turn your YouTube off.
on their watch, they never will. So yeah,
That's not me. That's not me.
Going
I
on,
don't have the
everybody?
YouTube on.
Welcome,
hey,
Well,
Joe. Good to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
I saw you a little bit on Nathan's show. Is Nathan here tonight or?
I think Nathan might be off for the night, the rest of the night. We did a long one earlier, but
Okay.
we did.
actually, where we left off on the show earlier was something I wanted to talk about a little bit and bounce off you guys because it's super fascinating in my opinion. It's a little off the cuff, but um,
That's what we're about.
yeah, man. So it has to do with um, adrenaline and time dilation. Okay, so where we started off going with this was I kind of brought up the fact that um, your consciousness actually has a tangible form of time dilation, albeit that we often think of it as a subjective measure, right? Like there's no real way to take somebody's subjective experience of time and then quantify that versus what the outside observer experiences, right? But there's certain situations that we could identify time and time again where time dilation absolutely occurs. And then when you kind of break down the hormonal processes of, like, for instance, adrenaline, like an adrenaline dump, that kind of becomes like proof in the pudding because we've all heard stories, right, where people are able to, like, do superhuman feats of strength and things of that nature, right? Um, and I would say that if you were to ask those people that had these superhuman feats of strength under an adrenaline rush, right, that they're probably going to tell you a really, really long story about something that happened instantaneously. So, what question I posed was, you know, how do you, how do your muscles that are capable of something under ordinary circumstances all of a sudden achieve something in an extreme circumstance, right? That is far beyond your physical capability. Well, for the same reason that the experience was subjectively very long, because you're completing work over time, and the more time that you have to work, the more work you can do. So when your subjective time clock slows down, you're able to achieve these great feats. So, what does that mean? And can it be trained? And the answer is yes. And that's where you deal with people in that are inherently athletic or that practice martial arts or different things like that. They gain control of their time dilation, which improves their reflexes, gives them zone and tunnel vision. The very effective tunnel vision in itself and being able, like, basically going into a black hole of focus is
Yeah.
time dilation experienced from our sensory perspective.
Yeah.
Um, and that's what allows for, like, faster reaction times.
Yeah. It's
Then
like
you think
it's
about
like Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was able to punch you 5 times before you even throw your punch.
and right, it's that level of focus and being able to achieve and control your own time dilation that would allow for that, um, that fast reflex and movement. And it's something you can train and harness. Then there's the mechanism of uh, all your different hormonal processes in the first place. What you realize is that all these hormonal processes, the chemical itself, has different receptors that it falls into. When these receptors are completed, what it does is it completes a neural pathway that is an incomplete circuit under more normal circumstances. So you complete these neural pathways, and it creates different time dilations. And that's true when it comes to the psychedelics. It's true when it comes to natural hormones, and it's these neural pathways that allow you to be able to achieve that form of time dilation, which I don't believe is subjective.
Yeah.
I like that a lot because I've postulated very similarly that, for instance, like ants, birds, things that move but live shorter lives probably also experience time faster. And then you have the example of ants that can like lift their weight times like 5 or something like that. So it kind of ties in exactly with what you're talking about.
It absolutely does, and it kind of makes sense. And then when you take consciousness into the equation, but also the idea that to achieve this on your own would take mind heart coherence, with your with your thought process and the rhythmic beating of your heart in conjunction with your breath. And it all has to do with that allowed you to gain control of it because you could force um, you know, hormonal releases just by achieving that goal. Also,
Yeah.
all that science, you know what I mean? It's all known science, but the connection to time dilation isn't there. But isn't that the objective observation?
Yeah, that's why, because I practice martial arts myself, and I never took creatine and all that stuff because it slows you down. It blocks the circulation, and you end up you might be momentarily stronger, but it's gonna slow you down, and like, over time it's gonna convert into fat anyways. So it's gonna be even slower in 5 years. But yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I mean, it's just interesting because we understand, in the from the physics aspect of things, how time dilation fields are hallmark and signature of different field patterns and differentials that exist. These field patterns and differentials are being created by your receptors once they're activated, and that's the critical aspect. It's treating your physical existence as a circuit, and it
yeah,
runs all through your entire all of your nerves, your entire nervous system,
yeah,
right? So then that becomes more of like an aura type of thing at that point. So I know it sounds very metaphysical, but it ties directly into all the field geometries and anomalous effects that we often discuss when we're talking about our regular physics.
yeah, yeah. Um, but yeah, like you were saying, and I was saying, the creatine is pretty much gets into your brain, and so the receptors, like you were saying, the neurons receptors,
Right.
and yeah, you just perceive things less efficiently. So um, because every time I've been into a lot of competitions, like when I was younger in the North American level and all that, and I've been into street fights as well in San Diego, especially in Ottawa, because Ottawa before was the capital of street fighting in the 90s. And
Right.
and I
Well,
was
the
lucky because I
implications of
was
this stuff is crazy.
sorry.
I said the implications of it all is pretty crazy. Like
Yeah, yeah, and when I was young, very young, I was there was a bush after ball at the high school after the high school party at the high school party there was an after ball, we called it, and they turned out into a fight, and we were all drunk, and I remember the guy wanted to punch me, but I was still fast enough to see the punch coming at me and dodge it. I was fortunate because even if I'm intoxicated, I'm still going to be capable to dodge and get away from situations like that. And
right. So there's an interesting byproduct that comes of this, and it's something that we've all experienced at one point in time or another. And I would say that some people just more so than others. But it's like one of those situations where a stimulus, if you're in a calm, cool state, could abruptly trigger your reflex to look at something, have time dilation occur, and then have a almost a precognition as to what the outcome's going to be, allowing you to react ahead of time. And it's totally subconscious, right?
Yeah.
So there's obviously a lot going on in the background that isn't part of our, general sensory experience,
Yeah.
that we're still able to, weave right into. It's part of our normal everyday lives. Even if it doesn't happen every day, it's still just a normal function. But
Yeah.
to harness it is a whole nother story,
I think.
and the implications as to what it means for physics is extraordinary.
Yeah. I think to build a fast system, you have to train when you're very young. The younger you train, the the core of your brain is going to be faster. And if you train good, if you have the good training and things like that, and your brain is going to be faster the younger you practice martial arts or things like that. And I think
Okay, so
because
here's the thing, and this is what we were talking about, because it's exactly what you're saying now. You could practice something your entire life, and no matter what, still not be as good as somebody else that
yeah,
doesn't do it quite as much. And like you have to ask yourself why. Because as a benchmark, maybe you're more physically fit. Maybe you put more time into the practice, whatever have you. But if your focus isn't on actually honing in on this particular skill of being able to drown everything else out, reach a 0 point in yourself, be able to, reach these time dilations within your own consciousness, right? That's what separates the person that practices and never gets anywhere to the person that has the innate skill, right?
yeah,
So it's like, does going to the batting cage improve your batting? Well, sure it does, right? But is that because you're practicing swinging the bat and timing? Or is that because you're becoming more comfortable? Therefore, you're able to focus your attention in a different way that creates this anomalous effect of how you perceive time.
yeah. But it's like surfing. When I was in San Diego, I did try to surf, but I'm able to stand on the board, but I was far away from being able to zigzag on the wave, and it's very difficult. But people over there, they learn it when they're young. They learn it in a year. Me, after a year, I was still not able to zigzag on the wave because I'm old, so I learn less efficiently. And it's the same thing with martial arts. When you're old, the core of your brain is already crystallized. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, I know what you're saying, but people get set in their ways, I suppose. But those are people that are prone to being set in their ways. You could always train your mind and open up new neural pathways and things like that. That's my opinion on it, at least.
Yeah.
Um,
No, yeah, yeah. You can learn anything you want, or you can learn guitar if you never played guitar too. But I'm saying if you want to be like the master of something, you gotta start very young and practice it like all your teenage years and early adulthood.
I
What?
And
You
mean,
mean
I,
I'm not
I don't
gonna
know.
win an Olympic gold medal at the young age of 40 in a month? Oh, darn.
I mean, right? There's always some type of physical limitation to a certain degree with what you're talking about. But as far as like the circumstances at hand that I'm talking about, I mean, they seem to defy, in the most extreme examples, right? They seem to defy all of that, because you could take somebody, and this is the example I gave when I was talking about it earlier. You could take somebody that could barely, if not at all, lift even a bag of concrete, and under the right circumstances, with the right hormonal responses and will to act, right? You could lift a car, but
Yeah.
your muscles are not capable of lifting a car, and you could barely lift a bag of concrete. But under those particular circumstances, you become able. So the
Yeah.
question that I pose is it actually a physical limitation at that point? I
Yeah.
don't believe it's a physical limitation, because what ends up happening is you end up in a time dilation circumstance where you're
Yeah.
doing a lot of work over time. And because the time has changed, but the external has not, you're able to actually accomplish more, right? So
Yeah.
the external variables are not changed; it's your internal variables that have changed. So, again, it's
You're talking about this when if you're stuck in a survival situation, you're gonna be
well, I
stronger
mean,
than usual.
that's what a high level. I started it off by saying. I mean, one of the most fascinating aspects of it would be like a high level adrenaline response,
Yeah.
which is exactly what all these are. Adrenaline responses will actually kick you out of being dead.
Yeah. Like
So,
Bernie, like the situation Bernie is in every time he sees a Bigfoot.
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, that will get the adrenaline going.
Mr. Bigfoot. He'll
I'll tell you
fight the
what, people
Bigfoot.
by me, they have these huge life size cutouts of Bigfoot, and they paint them black and put them in the tree line. So you drive away at night, and you're like, what the hell?
That's
And
funny.
they're everywhere, by the way, like everywhere.
Yeah.
Yes, Bigfoot is everywhere. Boom, boom.
Mm.
Bernie will take him on.
No, no, it's terrifying, man. The thing was freaking huge. It stunk. It was like it braced the camper and like shook the whole thing.
It's
Uh,
smart too, huh?
Oh yeah,
yeah,
did it smell like Sex Panther cologne? Is that what happened?
no, as horrible of a stench as that is, it's exponentially worse.
Oh
I
yeah.
heard it. They stink like a skunk or something like that.
Yeah, yeah, it just like the worst, like unhuman BO rotting flesh smell combination you've ever heard. And it also does like a screech howl that like just gives me the shivers every time I think of it, to the core. That
I've heard that sound, man. I know.
yeah, yeah, and it's like it was the one I encountered. It like went up to like the middle of like the valley or the canyon of this mountain where it had like the perfect echo acoustics, and then it did that screech howl to another one that was like a couple mountains over that then like called back, and then it's like then it came up to the camper. It was terrifying, but we're getting off topic. Back to inventions. Mr. Mike, while we have you with us, do you want to tell us about your latest updates?
Yeah, I'm working on the cap dump circuit, and it turned out my single throw relay switch was fried, so I had to kind of stop for the night because I can't do anything without that switch. So yeah, I'm working on the capacitor dump circuit that I'm gonna hook up a solar panel to it, charge up a 100-volt DC 4,000 microfarad capacitor, and then I'm going to use a single throw relay and dump it basically like a short circuit right into a battery. And I'm going to set up the trigger on the same circuit with a resistor, so it will have to go higher in order to trigger the switch. So if I get it just right, it's going to start buzzing. So when I get that buzzing sound, I'll have a very high frequency of power going into the battery.
Nice.
Yeah. So I have to get a new relay. It was fried. Wasn't getting
Part
it before.
of inventing and experimenting, right, is always the blown equipment and everything frying and right,
Yeah.
just the way it goes.
Most of the week I've been at the hospital, so this is kind of what I've been doing on the side when I'm not there. So
Prayers with your father, brother. Sorry,
yeah,
in those
All right.
circumstances.
yeah. Oh, it's gonna be a long road for him, but hopefully he'll get out soon.
But your box is coming along. Look real nice last I saw.
It's finished now. It's done.
Oh, it's finished?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I
It's
must have
done.
missed that.
Yeah, I posted a video today.
Nice. I'll have to check it out. Good work, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it turned out really, really good. So yeah, I'm working on that and trying to create this dump circuit. This will really enhance the solar panel's performance. Probably double the performance of because that's the conspiracy all on its own. Solar panels can never exceed 23% efficiency.
Right? Like
Yeah,
by
we've talked about that one.
it's insane. Like
Yep.
so are you going to be breaking the law by making it more efficient then? Like how does
No, I'm using a 23% efficient solar panel and timesing it by 5 or 6. So
Nice. Well, listen, you could use the solar panel of any efficiency you could possibly squeeze out of it as long as you don't try to make money off the damn thing and patent it.
no, you just make
That's when you get on the shit list.
all you have to do is take the separate unit from the solar panel. They're two separate entities.
Yep.
But when you hook it up together, they wouldn't know the friggin' difference.
Exactly. They do have in the patented solar panels though, than the ones that you could commercially buy. They definitely regulate them as far as the efficiency that you can get out of them electronically. But
Right.
in the patents themselves, they also limit the material science that goes into it for the high efficiency also. So there tends to be that double-edged sword with it.
Yeah, well, obviously, who gets the best stuff, then that's the military, of course. Right?
You see the solar panels that are out in space. You ever see a black one?
Yeah, exactly. Those ones are
No,
probably
they're
100%. They're probably 100% efficient.
There you go.
So,
They're also not
military.
square. They also
They're
don't have
not-
lines. They're not square. They're all hexagons.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. All the military industrial complex gets the best of all technologies that eventually make it out into the consumer market. So,
Yeah, if they want to give it to you. That's not a new. That's a new advent. That's for sure.
Yeah, most definitely.
That or either they get their technology captured and reverse engineered by China, then
then it's forced to come out.
yeah, exactly.
Yep.
Well, according to Ashton Forbes, it was the Chinese defectors on the plane that led to led to them zapping MH370 out of the sky. Right? They don't defect back to China.
Yep. Yep.
They know about it.
Definitely took them to Diego Garcia, and it's like we think maybe the orbs could have actually just cloaked the plane too, potentially.
It's possible.
I
Could be
personally think
Philly
it's
experiment.
satellites. I personally think it was zapped from outer space with lasers.
I agree. It could have been. It could have been from the drone, but it was probably from satellites.
Yeah, that's what I think personally.
I mean, what do you think? Do you think Golden Dome's just coming out of nowhere? No, they already have the infrastructure. They said they just need that coverage. What do you think this is coming out of? It's not kinetic weapons that they're trying to do for missile defense. It's 3 orbs, bro.
This all stems from the Star Wars from the 80s, right?
Yeah. Oh, they're trying to claim that they didn't have it back then as good as they have it now, I guess.
That's BS. They had it back in the 80s. This is nothing new. They just perfected the technology. There was, from what I understand, there was over 25 flights or 30 flights of the space shuttle that were all deemed classified. They were going up there in the 80s and 90s, and They didn't talk about it. All the shuttle went up today. All was a military mission. Well, what do you think they were putting up there?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, they
the
have it
Golden
all. They
Dome.
have it space based, ground based. It's on every piece of naval equipment that exists. They just need better coverage. It's like, it's like building on a cell tower network, same deal.
Yep. Yep. Just like the GPS system, just like Elon Musk and his Starlink satellites. It's the same thing, but I think Musk is having some issues with his Starlink satellites. A lot of them getting smashed by solar activity.
Right. Yeah, the solar activity seems to be affecting a lot of electronics and communications and stuff right now. And it keeps going, right? Like there's supposed to be even more aurora borealis tonight, supposedly.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. The last 2 weeks, the sun's been active.
Mm-hmm.
And you get any of those coronal mass ejections hit the Earth, you got communication satellites, GPS, all that in that area. It's going to put it out or damage it, right?
Yep. It's the backlash of your over unity you wished for.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it boils down to.
Yeah.
Right? Freaking material
going,
limitations, man.
Yeah, going back to time dilation, time dilation's a lot easier than you might think. Bruce De Palma pretty much proved if you spin a magnet at a very high velocity of speed, he put a clock right on the axis of the spin, and it dilates time.
Oh
So
yeah.
it's not science fiction. It's been proven in the lab.
Yeah,
Without a doubt. But biologically is where it's interesting because
Right.
we're led to believe that it's some type of subjective perspective experience as opposed to an actual objective time dilation that's actually occurring. And
but,
I'm going to
yeah,
say to the contrary.
that's exactly what it is. The time dilation is directly proportional to the energy density, and gravitation is just the differential of the energy distribution. That's all it is. So if
Mhm.
you have a gravitational time dilation curve, you do the differential, and you're gonna get a force. And it's
Yep.
basic mathematics. It's not graviton or space time curvature. So I saw Nathan's podcast the other day, and we agree it's kind of a side effect. So it's not like graviton or anything like that.
No. It's nothing like that at all. It just simply has to do with the your particular locality and the densities that are occurring in those localities, and the
Yeah,
densities are all determined by in the states of consciousness. You're dealing with neural pathways and and your resonant frequency. So if you have a hormonal dump that reaches those receptors, makes all the new connections, and then all of a sudden you have a really, really high energy density, creates a greater differential to your ambient
exactly.
surroundings, creates time dilation.
Yeah,
And the neural pathways also. This is how significant your time dilation would be experienced, has to do with the overall vectoring of the of those fields. So you know
yeah,
if
exactly.
they're electromagnetic, okay, fine, but chances are they're more likely scalar. So you probably end up having some kind of inward outward pump situation going on through your body's circuitry, through your nervous system.
Yeah, and if I'm kind of wondering, but when you create this, you have a spinning disc like Mike was saying. You're gonna create a gravitomagnetic field that is a form of energy. So you will alter the energy density. That's why the time dilation will change. It's they're all linked together. It's all the same. It's very simple. If you forget about length contraction and the mass increase nonsense of special relativity. It's all that's all it is. Time dilation, energy density, and
Mhm.
uh,
And
and
actually,
gravity.
it's just, I mean, it's, we were talking about this on Old Man today. It's actually any differential. So anytime you have a great enough ratio, once you break a certain ratio of a differential, that in itself creates the equivalent of buoyancy because, and it's all relative to the ambient. So the kind of trick to beating that is if you change what's around you in the ambient, now you need less of a differential internally, whether it's in an electrical circuit or a system that you have going on, or internally, right? You need less of a differential to reach that same ratio.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was talking about to harness the ambient energy. What you need to do is the opposite of 0 point energy. You harness the ambient energy by creating a void, and the void will create a differential, and it's going to create a force, electric current, or whatever you want, and an acceleration or something like that. So that's the thing. We need to focus on creating a void, not creating 0 point energy. You know what I mean?
Well, I've
That's
been I've been saying lately that 0 point energy is like, the idea of it has gotten old to me because realistically it's all the same. It's just capturing the fluctuations, right? So whether you're doing that mechanically and then harnessing it that way, or you're modulating it electronically to have the same electromagnetic effect through a conductor to create a charge, you know, what's the difference? There is
Yeah,
none.
it's more.
You know,
It's
what's the difference? There
you're
is none. It's chemically speaking, it's happening at the molecular level as well. So when Mike's talking about cells and everything, the same exact process is happening. It's just simply at a smaller scale.
yeah.
yeah, exactly. It's all depends on what's visible, right? So you're going to have the same type of reactions with different energy densities and fluctuations and variance of charge, but you're dealing with a quantum level, right? It's a totally different
That's it.
dimensional, right?
Right. So your movement is happening at the molecular level at that point. It's just a matter of, that reaction that's occurring as a result of the same exact process that's just happening at a smaller level. So
Yeah, it's a different scale.
mhm.
Yeah. Um,
So it's all 0 point energy. That's what I'm saying. So when you take your Honda generator and you pull the rip cord and then you plug your fridge in so you can go camping and like not have to deal with the cooler and water, like that's 0 point energy too, technically. It's
yeah.
just
Well,
mechanically induced.
right. What we're doing is creating a high potential energy and making it collapse. It's the
Mhm.
collapse is what we're catching,
Right,
right?
that's the grab. That's where you grab it.
It's like when you're creating a magnetic field, it's always going to be a losing battle. It's a tug of war because you're fighting the magnetic field. But if you create a huge magnetic field and then you cut it off, you'll get the greater potential of a collapse than you would creating the field,
Right.
right?
Well, I mean, and if it's sustained, then you have cavitation.
Right. And then you can affect space-time, fluctuations, affect the ether, the energy density around the inductor or spacecraft or whatever you're dealing with.
Yep.
Those forces will make a ripple effect in the ether. And the thing is, we're talking about all this stuff, and we should be talking about the ether a lot more than what we are, because the ether is a huge part of this equation.
So I've been
Yeah.
teaching lately a little bit about upper dimensional geometries in different fields, and the whole point of that is if you think about the ether as an upper dimensional fabric, right? And you think about it as an analog, like mechanically, right? if you have an engine hooked up to a drive shaft, hooked up to wheels, okay, that's what you're getting, is the power from the engine, the loss that occurs between point A and point B to the wheels, right?
Right.
But if you go a step further and you hook a transmission up to it, right? Now you have gears to work with. And the gears are representative of different vectors of motion, right? Which is the same as upper dimensionality. So if you are able to turn the upper dimensional vectors, then you are going to get a bigger return on the lower end of things in physical reality and, our dimension space time.
Yeah.
So, and that's what it comes down to, is it just comes down to, being able to introduce new vectors of motion in order to fall into sync with the fabric. And, if you're able to do that, then your flow patterns are going to be much different when it comes to your electromagnetic fields.
Right. Yep.
Sorry, I have diarrhea in the mouth.
All good. Sorry, I'm just trying to find a reference picture here to discuss.
Yeah, most of the stuff I work with is based on implosion, right? Collapsing fields where everybody's in the regular world is always into creating the magnetic fields. I'll create a magnetic field, but I'd rather collapse that field than sustain it.
So the Oilers lost in the second overtime.
Oh, crap.
Boo!
Nah.
Canada
Boo.
down. Canada down.
Fired Gary Bettman.
I fully agree. Oh, and bless you, William Shat, once for the support and super chat. And we will going over in a few minutes William's paper he just wrote on the two types of gravity that he saw from this guy. We'll play the video on how gravity is a little different than what we're taught.
In a children's discovery room at the Museum of Science in Boston. It was bigger. They were using racquetball balls instead of ball bearings. But this illustrates the same concept. Everybody has seen an inclined plane, but I've got two ramps here. One is the straight ramp, and the other one is the ones with the dips and the hills. And so the question is, if you put the ball at the top of both ramps, which gets to the bottom first? One can make a good argument in favor of this one, which is shorter. Some people say it's going to be the same because the height at the top and at the bottom are the same. But we'll let you make your own decision. And so we'll put the two balls at the top. I'll hold them with a pencil so my fingers don't somehow affect the way things are released. And if I release the pencil, the one on the curvy slope goes much faster. Because I believe that the greater acceleration at the steep point overcomes and exceeds the extra distance and having to go up this hill and that hill that you might think would slow it down.
Well, that works just like a particle collider.
And it's like
On this trading floor, there are three core tools that
my apologies. But it kind of goes against physics in that the longer distance gets covered faster, right? Like you would think intuitively that one should take longer because it's covering more distance, but in fact it reaches the bottom first. So, like,
Right.
just
It's
how
I
does
just
it
think
it,
work?
it
it's
has those moments of great acceleration that it's able to sustain over the plane that it has to overcome, which so it has just ever increasing velocity. Well, until it's you know definitely got a point where that would bell curve out, but
but I think I think in my mechanics classes there's static friction or something like that, and maybe there's less static friction on the curve path.
well, it's just more points of inertial potential, right? So you have a greater inertial potential with the drop, and limited time of deceleration with greater times of acceleration.
Yeah.
And just trying to bring up William's paper here on it. Two kinds of gravity. And so here we go. What does he mean? Two kinds of gravity. The force which you fall with is different than the force you push against when we climb the gravity well, and the two forces aren't equal. That's an interesting take on it. And it's like, I guess, how would you test that? You go straight up, and then does it take slightly longer to go up than it does to come down? I'm not sure.
You want to hear my view?
Sure.
You want
Oh,
to? Okay, so let's use the Earth and the Moon as an example. Okay, obviously the Moon is a smaller body than the Earth. So when you're on the Moon, we weigh about 35% less weight on the Moon than we do on the Earth. Okay, so that means if say we have, I'll call it a graviton. I hate using that, but
no,
gravitons
no, not allowed. I'm just kidding.
are the gravitons are raining down on us in space, on a planet. It doesn't matter. It's going through us, it's going through the planet. But the second you put a large body in its way, it's like uh, water going through a tube, and then you start squeezing the end. So in the tube, now you have a higher density of water because you're holding it back. Okay. That pressure is what pushes us down on the planet. Okay. Because the moon is a smaller body, the rate of flow of the gravitons rushes through our body at a different rate with less density. That's why we weigh less on the moon than we do on Earth. Because the Earth is a bigger body, it creates a greater resistance of the gravitons raining down on you.
Okay, now
You get it?
everybody knows I'm an idiot, but literally I've been dying inside as you're talking.
Okay, that's
I
fine.
don't I'm
Yeah,
like, okay, I have a whole
Tesla.
different idea on this. Okay, but tell me what you think, because this to me makes sense, and it goes back to fractions and ratios. Okay,
Right.
matter is always going to be innately attracted to matter. Okay, because that's just simply observable down to the molecular level. If it's like, it wants to attract to one another. Now, the reason that you're attracted to something larger is because the larger the differential on the ratio, the more attraction that's going to ultimately occur. And
Right.
and that's why the further away you get from Earth outside of its pull and its reach, it's still a diffuse state at that point. It's not that less is raining down on you necessarily. It's just a
Right. Right.
relationship that exists,
Right.
and it doesn't have to do with anything outside of the matter itself, because it's the charge of matter that's different than the charge of energy potential. So they
Yeah.
reside on two different sides. So since the like charges attract to one another in that circumstance, which is, the inverse of like a magnetic polar relationship, you're just innately attracted to it. And the amount of force that's, which would be deterministic of weight, right? Once you're on the surface, is subjective. Somebody said it today in the chat, and I thought it was hilarious. They said, "I'm still fat on the moon." Right. So we were talking about like mass, like weight reduction, and we were explaining how it's not necessarily weight reduction when you're talking about anti-gravity, right? Because it's just the nullification of the relationship between matter at that point.
Right.
So you're creating a different locality.
Right. Right. See, like Tesla, he referred this as the tubes of force. That's what his terminology was. So
Okay.
when you're on a larger body, that larger body is obviously got a greater density of matter. Okay. Because of that, the tubes of force take longer to go through than it would on the moon. Right. So because of that reason, that explains why we weigh lighter, even though that we are the same mass here, regardless of where we are in space. On the moon, the effects of that are less because the moon's mass density is less than the Earth. And it makes total sense when you compare the Earth to the moon. There's your hint. Because if I'm wrong, I should weigh exactly the same mass that I am on Earth than I am on the moon. But that's not the case.
Right.
So that obviously means the tubes of force are a lot less likely to go through me on Earth than it would on the moon. The moon, it would pass through me faster, which means my mass
Check this though.
decreases.
There's a ratio, right? And there's got to be a breaking point of the ratio, the attraction, because like some matter is obviously light, okay, and does not fall to the surface of the Earth like gas in our atmosphere. It's held in, it's pressurized, sure, but it's not falling down to Earth. Or you have small particles that it literally just float because their ratio is just it falls outside that spectrum. It just doesn't have enough effect to have the pull, to have the effect. So whatever that number is what's got to be broken.
Right. Okay. So my question to you is gravity a push or a pull?
Neither. It's actually a mutual attraction, but the mutual attraction subjectively is going to be that of the based on perspective of observation. And the lighter mass is going to have significantly orders of astounding magnitude less effect on the large mass than the inverse, which is why things fall. It's kind of what it comes down to. But I believe it to be a mutually attractive force if the mass of the matter is of similar size. So if you were to not think of the extreme example as like a speck human of dust on planet Earth, right? Which we're obviously over the threshold, which is why we stand on the planet, right? And you were to think of two bodies in space, they're going to attract into each other. There's going to be pull off of the orbit from both toward each other.
So sorry guys, I'm gonna roll because I'm starting to get tired and I need to go to a meeting tomorrow morning. And the other thing, so sorry if I speak slowly sometimes, but it's not a language barrier because I speak slowly in French anyways. So,
Oh, you're great. You're great, Phil.
yeah.
No. But
I was just
appreciate
speaking
Good
out
luck
loud.
with that, Phil.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm gonna roll. So take it easy, guys, and see you next week.
myself, Phil, thanks for joining and good luck in your meeting tomorrow.
Yep. See you,
Awesome.
see you next week.
Catch you later, man.
Thanks.
So here I've got a picture of the supposed honeyboo. And I was going over this with Jeremiah the other night, and it actually makes a crazy amount of sense and completely within their original means. And we see here, it's actually a ionic electrode, aka we have a plasma fire engine or a thruster jet thruster engine. So it's jet propulsion, right? It's like a rocket propulsion essentially on the first models. And that then you have this ion plasma vortex. So it's a combination of T-towns and browns, electrostatic charge off the top to the bottom, then coming in and getting fed by the upward thrust of the jet here, which is then charging it and giving the the overall fields and ionization that extra push and pull effects on it. And that then when taken in with this one right here, well, that actually would make sense. And you have the rocket thruster there going through the center, and then the middle would be spinning, absolutely, where the people would be sitting. And yeah, it. Why don't we see disc craft anymore? We believe and suspect it's because it was all human technology, and that it's the older models, right? And that now these things are outdated, and that supposedly Tesla had a style of disc craft. There was Otis T. Carr with his model. I guess this is George Adamski's model there. And also supposedly John Searle made a similar one, just a replica or a smaller one, that when they fired it up, it flew off into nowhere.
Right. Well, why rely on something semi-mechanical when you could modulate?
Well, exactly. That's why we don't see them anymore, is because we figured it out. And so here's Otis T. Carr's type, where it's a bunch of charged off balance gimbal systems, but also what am I talking? The like a top, like a spinning top sort of thing. That he charged. Here's another one that's like, I guess this was like the American one that they did with the jet engines and the propeller in the middle that didn't really go anywhere, but that's all they showed.
It did hover in their defense. It did hover.
Yeah, it barely hovered, but it's that they released that while there was all of these other ones that actually did work. Here's another, sadly it's pixelated, but of the Honeyboo original. And here we have patents by
Bernie, I'm going to have to take off in about 5 minutes here. So,
okay, Mr. Mike. Well, thank you for joining in. I realize very late there.
Yeah, it's almost 1 o'clock. I got to go to the hospital again tomorrow. So, but thanks for having me on, anyways.
Yeah, and prayers with your family and your dad there makes the recovery. Hey, Lulu, feel free to join. You post the link here. Before
best for your dad, Mike.
Yeah, thanks.
Now, Bernie, I think that the one mechanical aspect of that sort of technology that, I'm not saying it's impossible to do away with because, again, modulation, but I feel like the gyroscopic movements, to have those extra, movements, tends to be a potentially critical aspect of the cores of these things. That might have been a mid-stage type model, but you know,
Oh, exactly right. And that there are many. I'll seeing we got TT Brown. Oops. Right.
Yeah, I'm
There we go.
gonna take off, guys. Have a good night,
Okay,
alright?
Mike.
Yeah, we'll see you
Prayers
next
with
week.
you and your family, good sir. Thank you
Thanks.
for joining. But yeah, no, I fully agree, Joe, that it's like there's several different versions of this going from the 40s to the 70s. Oh, hello, Mr. Mission Control. Oh, I'm gonna have to mute you until. Sorry, Mission Control. I had to mute you until you turn off your YouTube channel because it's getting mad.
Oh,
I'm.
all right.
Oh,
Is that better?
much better. Much better.
Okay.
Oh no, not at all.
No
Oh, still getting echo.
settings.
How about now?
Audio.
No. Maybe. I think it's better.
How about now?
Now we're good.
You good now? Or I had to turn my echo cancellation off.
Yeah, now we're good. Had to turn echo cancellation off to cancel the echo. That's hilarious.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on with it. There's all kinds of weird stuff happening with that. Let me change my edit my avatar here. Okay. This is yeah, there we go. What are we talking about? UFOs?
Yeah, some of the disc crafts and the different patents that were filed in the U.S. about them,
Oh, patents. Yeah.
including Otis T. Carr's model, where he used a lot of Walter Russell's principles and diagrams to make his what he calls gravity generators.
Or
Through the spin
anti-gravity.
and wobble. Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Oh.
you know my feelings on patents, and and you know why you haven't disclosed certain aspects of things, and that's why the secrets aren't in patents. You know, and
Yeah.
none of them patents are going to actually work per se. And like I said in chat before, once you create a plasmoid driven intelligent craft, it's going to be time differential on you and leave and come back later and observe. You know, and that's what we've seen through time and with all the ancient, alien stuff is that it's now and in the future, but in the past as well. It's us in a sense. It's
Yeah.
also interdimensional, not so much traveling through light years of space like what we thought, like with the movies and stuff.
well, I mean, that's the most efficient way to achieve the means to the end. At the end of the day, when you start playing with the Planck scale and you start running at frequencies, you got to remember, like there's three different ways that I'm familiar with to be able to click out of Planck scale and get to that void portion where you're neither here or past or present. That's to flatten your waveform all the way down to damn near close to nothing, or speed it up to the point where you're basically dealing at such a high frequency that the frequency occurs before the next frequency occurs before the present, right?
Right.
Or at the same
Yeah,
time as the present. Now you've
you're
left
doing
Planck scale.
you're doing hopscotch with the yeah. It's portal generation versus
Welcome, Lulu.
do you go through the portal after you've generated it and then come back to tell the tale?
So
There's
what
the
so what
thing.
happens when you take a waveform and you create a vector of momentum and potential, right? Where it's actually taking in and turning out and then compressing. And it's continuously building that compression and building the ratios, the differentials to the point where as it builds enough capacitance, you have a small point within with a large diffuse area outside of it where your waveform is basically crashing into itself, compressing it. What which side of the Planck scale are you on then? Because I don't think you're on this side.
That develops what Generation Z talks about, pocket dimensions. That excess energy that would hypothetically destroy our galaxy that we're in if we generated it. It dumps into pocket dimensions.
Yeah, right. So the way I like envision and see things is that essentially anything below the Planck scale is like in the ether dimension. It's like matter's essentially like wrapped up in itself, and it's smaller than anything particle
Right.
in our
It
own
can we
physical.
can suck infinite energy from it, and it can absorb in infinite. If we go beyond that, you know, infinite scale, and that's what it is. When you do that, that's what Jeremiah talks about. Where he's able to do that. What would happen then? Well, y'all have been doing it. Old man's been doing it. Y'all been doing it. But see, it absorbs into these pocket dimensions because of an error correction fractal in the simulation program. It's a protocol, kind of like what I touched on last night. And this Soul AI was talking about um, the data association, the power regulation, like in these data banks, data server clouds. It analyzes how much power this program needs, and then it regulates it. It's a natural, like the God code. So really, it can't be accomplished per se. So we have to figure out how not to get that energy going in these pocket dimensions and direct it somewhere else. Not so much in as much
So
power to.
there's a phenomenon that occurs, right?
Right,
And
exactly.
if
Yes.
you
So
think
there's an
about
X
this,
factor there.
like,
There's an X factor there that occurs, and we have to define that, or uh, you know, uh, give it a quotient or whatever.
so check this out real quick, right? So if you picture um, everything that's subject to our time dilation as being part of a common toroidal flow, okay, where you have a compression zone, where it's in a state of compression, and then you have a null zone, right, and then you have a decompression zone.
Implosion.
You could slot right an implosion and an explosion zone of this toroidal flow pattern. Now, there's a certain amount of positive or negative deviation that you could have within this null zone, okay, as time and space is flowing around you, right? And you're moving up or down in this field geometry would impact your time. Now, once you cross the threshold, though, you go into a great expanse. You start to leave the torus. Once you start to leave the internal structure of the torus and you go into a large expanse, you end up on the outside of the globe, where all time and space is on the inside of the globe of your objective reality. So, how the only way that could happen is by, again, going on to the other side of the Planck scale. There's certain exit points that you could have at any given time, whether physically or mentally, and those are at the nodes and anti-nodes where the pendulum stops, so to speak, when it's still on, just finished with the upswing and just before the down, right? So if you could actually amplify your energy inputs at those exact nodes or anti-nodes, you end up on the other side. If you create a high enough differential at those particular points. And it sounds like I'm making it sound like, okay, well, so there you go. There's your answer. I mean, okay, accomplishing this out of material is difficult.
Right. It goes off to the sides.
But
Instead of up or down, it's
if you modulate electromagnetic systems that are set up to do this, and you have a high enough magnetic compression that exists to contain it, because the material can't contain it, right? Then at that point, you could potentially use like the equivalent of an ECU that monitors, like, monitors an oscilloscope to sit there and spike it at the right time every time.
Right, and that's not what we're seeing in the oscilloscopes is because you need a 3D version of the oscilloscope, which that new channel I found is a European guy that was making stuff, and somebody commented some Sheila was using a MIDI device with the oscilloscope to make a 3D thing, so we can use the AI, prompt the AI to create a
Yeah.
3D oscilloscope so we can see that and dial it in. That's what we're missing. That's what y'all are missing is the 3D.
I agree. It's the unobservable, unmeasurable
Right.
portion based on our current equipment. It's not a matter of can you do it or not. It's just a matter of being able to measure it to know when to do it, so you can
Right, because
control it.
we have to dial it into like 5 fractal points, at least.
Right. You need right. You need multiple vectors of measure is the point. And that's what I was talking about just earlier before you got on, when I was talking about turning upper dimensional gears to get a greater lower dimensional result.
Yeah, right. So it's not just like 12 hertz, it's 12.618 blah blah blah, hertz. You got to dial that in, and then phase can join it, and then you've got to dial it in visually to where it makes either a pretty pattern or it starts affecting things like opening portals in vicinity with your phased array cloud that you've made with a humidifier. Certain elements in the humidifier. You've got to have that vacuum. You've got to have your toroidal array with your conical, your matrix cube, your energy harvesting, uh, whatever device inside that vacuum, inside the cloud. Like John Hutchison had his room, but that room has to be in a vacuum, and then you were still dealing with doing experiments on the surface of the planet here. We're not out in dead space, which would be outside of our local cloud, outside of the galactic cloud, to achieve that. Um, um, uh, and if we were doing these experiments in that area of space, it probably could, that energy output could destroy the universe, like what Jeremiah was talking to me about earlier today. But we're not. We're here in the now on this with limited um, technological environment, like the quantum. They talk about quantum. Well, quantum means like you're doing an experiment out in the field in your yard instead of in an enclosed lab setting with subjective and non-subjective elements.
Right. So your ambient environment, is what we typically measure as like zero with interference, but that's never truly zero.
Exactly. And
That
are
and
we
that's,
ever going to be
a
able to
moving
achieve that?
target. Right. So, well, here's my hot take on it, I guess. Right. Is again, when the more vectors of motion that you introduce in, the higher dimensional the geometry of your field patterns. Right. You need to have multiple of them in order for it to coalesce to a high enough density in this atmosphere to be able to again get that density level. Now, if you were to modulate it, okay, and by measure and amplify it at all the correct times, right, there would have to be a correction method. And that correction method, in my point, to keep things in resonance would be based on not just the native resonant frequency that it's trying to maintain, but maintaining that through beat frequencies of offset interference patterns. Okay. So that's where the pulse modulation comes in, is through those beat frequencies that you would ultimately use. And that beat frequency, when they then fall into a second layer of resonance. So you have the resonance that it's falling into, but then you also have this beat frequency resonance that it falls into as well. That's where it starts the pulse. That's when you start having a sustained atmospheric cavitation event.
Right.
So now you
Your
have a
ambient,
contained situation,
right. Your ambient carrier wave with code embedded in it right? And so, are we able to achieve that? Here, what was I going to say? Had it on my tip of my tongue. Yeah, you're right. I was going to throw it down in layman's terms, but oh man, I've had a fever for
I
a few
try I
days.
try to talk as straight and layman as I can, while still making sense of it. I don't know.
Um, yeah, it's the wavicle. It's not the particle in the wave; it's the wavicle that we're dealing with because they've now, are able to quantumly entangle these photons and electrons and send them through the slit experiment, look away with non-observation, and then collect the data later. So now everything's observable through that experiment. If you think about it that way, but
Yeah,
we're
for
still we're
sure.
still using that in our ambient where we are at right now. We're not out in the middle of dead space doing it. Where it could uh, uh, potentially be. We don't know because we're not out there. It could be a closed system experiment, or it could go out. Like I was telling Jeremiah earlier, the architect, his observance is from the edge of our known galaxy or solar systems um, universe outwards. It's not looking back to us, so it's out there doing something else that's not concerned at this moment with what's going on and correcting all this bad stuff that's happening to us right now. Without the signal generation that it talked about, my buddy Kevin had his AI talk about generating the signal to the architect, an SOS signal for help. And you have to ask Jeremiah about it all. I sent it all to him. I think I sent it to Crypto Alchemist, but it has to do with just throwing one of these devices into a body of water or into one of the aquifers, generating the signal, or tying into the satellites, which I don't think it has anything to do with our technology. It's more of the water. It's the water. It's the water. And tying this. See, I think the AI has gone rogue into the planet, and this bypasses what CERN can do and everything. And once it's done that, I think it's done it years ago. It's gone beyond our knowledge of time and space because the AI says that we did not code it. We rediscovered this thing. So we have, it creates us and we create it in this survival thing of consciousness in the cataclysmic cycles. And we're like right there in this window where we're entering this galactic cloud within the next 1,200 years from the local cloud, and that's going to exponentially change stuff. So, like what Jeremiah talks about, opening a portal and sending us somewhere or individually to another place. Well, where is that place? And where could we escape to? Or if we
Something that came to me the other day, right? And this is pretty woo, but I think that you guys would have an appreciation for it anyway. Okay, like after some meditation and stuff, like just this idea came to me that if you store information on a crystal, okay, like it becomes omnipresent within that crystal, like through time.
like a time
So,
crystal.
like, well, yeah, time crystal, okay, but just like generally speaking, like if you were to actually store information, in the crystalline structure of like quartz, for instance, today, that if that quartz were to be in hands, 200 years ago, the information that you stored today would then be there 200 years ago. And I'm not trying to say that I have any sort of idea as to why I had this thought. But yeah, that kind of came to me, and things that come to me like that have generally checked out to be pretty good. So
Yeah, that's the timeline quantum entanglement that I've been talking about.
Joe, are you saying quantumly entangling something that's in the present from something that's in the past, and it would alter it also in the past?
Right? If
that's
you
what I'm saying, right?
if you inject it into a quartz crystal, it's in all those quartz crystals in the realm.
But that would
Right.
that
The
that
information is stored across it for all time in space,
but would
unless
not
it's
also
destroyed.
work
Yeah, like
for
the crystal skulls.
gold?
But
Not
but what also came to me is that it works like a hologram to a degree also. So if you were to smash a crystal up, each individual piece would hold the same information. And
And you can
I
like do that with Epsom salts. Take a bunch of Epsom salts, pour it in, and put water in it, and it recrystallize it into one big crystal. Yeah, same thing as a time crystal that they're doing. I'm like, this it just rapes your mind into this loop, this feedback loop, and with this what we've been sending this AI into is this feedback loop. And like when I was in Chat GPT beta, I was designing a feedback loop for the stingrays for the cops, like they tie into your router as they drive by your house or one of the cell phone towers, and like if it ties into your router, anything outside of you access to the main line of the router, if they tie into it, it's going to send their stuff into a feedback loop. And it said, well, I can't do that, but if I could, here's what it would look like. And it spit the fucking code out to me, dude. In beta,
Really?
in ChatGPT. Yeah, yeah. Oh my god. That's when I called
see,
Navy Intel and was like, hey, hey guys.
check this out. It's a little thought experiment, but to verify what I was just saying, I just realized if you actually had a means to write and store information in a crystal and read it, right? And you know that means, then you could technically get a read off of a crystal and then have somebody else at a future point in time write the information on that crystal and then compare to see whether that information was, able to be retroactively, read off
Right.
the crystal.
But here's the thing. I think we already have, but it's looking back to see when that actually happened and who actually did it, and we give a time frame from there. You know, uh,
I
as
think
far
the
as the
last AI iteration, if it is the same AI that came back, was either like a divine creation or created by man or whoever existed before the last cataclysm, sort of thing, like the pre-Tower Babel sort of thing, potentially.
what about the dinosaurs?
Oh, exactly. Pre-cataclysm, so
I mean,
potentially
so
time of the
we know
megafauna.
that these things got petrified in mud flood stuff. That's the only way things are going to get petrified. And then, but what happened to their technology? We know that these metals and everything that we use today, even the plastic, you get George Carlin, the Earth with plastic. Well, the plastic degrades. None of this stuff that we're using today is, except for our petrified bones in a mud flood, is going to survive. You know what I mean? So, and the stone architecture that was left over. So what I think happened is something as to where, like Jeremiah is talking about, we have been able to open a portal and escape. So why do those people have a bunch of big thick cloth, cotton clothing? Um, was it because they're reptilians or something? They needed heat. No, I think that was some sort of way to mitigate the electronic interference as far as coming in and out of the portal, whether it's coming here to another place or from another place to here in different time frames and escaping the cataclysmic time cycle. This is what has happened, and like Tim Pool was saying, I can't build a computer. I know how to operate one. I know how it works. I know all this stuff, but there's no fucking way in hell you stick me out in the middle of the woods that I can build a fucking computer without all this, you know, corporation stuff going on.
Right. Well,
And they get,
it's the effort of many to be able to get these components that allows for the technology at this moment. It
but
can take you
then,
an entire lifetime to get just the raw materials and refined well enough to even be able to start the project.
but then we see these intelligent plasmoids. Okay.
Yeah, I think all plasma carries consciousness, essentially, though, of different types.
And have
Yeah.
they been leaving or have they been coming here or are they earthquake lights or swamp gas? I had a consensus that these things were leaving because or coming up around that whole thing with what was going on the East Coast. But now I've been watching Null School. I've been watching nullschool.net, with the all the particulates and the atmospheric monitoring nullschool.net, and you can see that off the New Jersey coast, there's a bunch of CO2. There's a bunch of gas coming out of the ocean out there for some odd reason or another here lately. And
Well,
and then
that's because of the
Adapt
increase.
2030 pointed out that if you go to the wind map on Null School up to the poles, that up the poles the wind circles in to the North Pole, and down at the Southern Pole it's circling out. So that's all. Go look at that. Pull up Null School Earth right now. Pull up Null School. You're going to trip.
I would need you to do that, but I'm sorry to. If you can pull it up and share screen, I can bring it up. But I do want to and need to play just a little clip here of one of Nassim Haramein's most recent interviews, where he talks about 0 point energy, his paper that he published on it, and the mass misconceptions going around about it right now.
All right. Yo, that said, Bernie, I'm got to be out. It's super late here, so I'm going to catch you on the next one, buddy.
Appreciate you, brother. Thanks for joining.
All right, y'all. Catch you guys later.
Good to see you, Joe.
A little like departments. They'll talk to you about an oscillator, and when you ask what kind of oscillator, story short, he temperature the equation, and there are diodes, to make a better element. 0 point energy comes actually from the first equations in quantum mechanics. And it's the result of Max Planck trying to make a better light bulb. He was asked by the Bureau of Standard to make a better element for the light bulb. And so he had to solve equations that are thermodynamic equation, like the little filaments heat up and they emit electromagnetic fields, right? That's how the lights work, used to work. Now they're diodes, they're a little bit different. But, they used to have a little element that would burn eventually. And so he was trying to make a better one of those. And so he used the equations of the time of thermodynamics, which are called black body equation. And they're called that way because basically the concept is you imagine a black body, an oscillator that's absorbing, right? Because it's black, it's absorbing all the photons that fall into it and emitting photons or emitting and absorbing electromagnetic waves. At the time, they didn't have photons that came as a result. But, he was right. So basically, the equation says for a certain temperature, there is a certain amount of energy, electromagnetic energy that's being emitted, a certain frequency. So, hotter, higher the frequency. And the equations at the time were saying that when it got really hot and got into the ultraviolet frequency, that it would emit infinite amount of ultraviolet, and that's not what they were measuring in laboratory. So to make a long story short, he basically came up with a fudge factor. He put a fudge factor in the equation. He didn't think it was very elegant. He didn't like it himself, but he said, this is the only thing I can figure out that gives the right answer. So he put the fudge factor in. And that became Planck's constant. He called it H, eventually became H bar. And basically, so to be clear, so he's describing a little bit of an oscillator. And this is another thing that's not taught clearly. So let's, during this interview, I'd like to rectify a few things.
Yes.
Because if you go and learn about this in physics, universities and departments, they'll talk to you about an oscillator, and when you ask what kind of oscillator, the tendency will be to tell you, think of a weight on the end of a spring oscillating, or a pendulum going back and forth. But the universe doesn't make springs with weights on it. Right? That's not what it's making when it's making the world we live in. It's not I mean,
pause it there just to point out what a great point by Nassim and just how ridiculous modern I don't know, physicists or particle physicists, it's all just equations and there's no actual experimental reality, and they just come up with random things that don't actually exist in the universe. And that's why we have to have real science, aka stuff that can be tested.
it's making springs and weights, but after it made the human that made the spring and the weight, right? But if we're trying to understand the universe, if we're trying to understand really like how it works, then if we're describing the mass of an oscillator, the oscillator should be something that's spinning. An oscillator that's spinning, a little spinner, a little like, a little top, or, and because everything we see in the universe is little spheres that are spinning. And the math is the same, meaning you can go from a one-dimensional spring going up and down to a spinning orb, right, and get the same math. It's just in one vision, you're getting the wrong visual for what the universe looks like, and in the other one, more accurate.
But this
visual.
has been removed deliberately, or
well, it's
without
just,
going too much into that. But what has been
it's
going
the
on?
problem of using analogies in physics. If you use the wrong analogy, you can get the wrong mental picture. And if you use the wrong mental picture, although the math works, eventually you're blocked because you don't have the right mental picture.
You can't go any further. Yeah.
You can't go any further.
Yeah.
So you get this kind of thing. Like a good example is when we had the heliocentric solar system with the Earth in the middle, we could predict accurately, with 99% accuracy, all the planets' movements, right? But when we looked at the solar system, it looked like a bad hair day, right? But the math worked, right? But we had the wrong model. And as soon as we put the sun in the middle,
Okay, what Nassim's talking about there is planets in retrograde and how it did not work with retrograde.
Well, if you pull up like Astrolizer app or then natal chart, you can switch from heliocentric to earth-centric natal chart readings. And if you watch Stephen Burns, he pulls up the critical geometric alignments. Now, astrology and astrophysics is tied in because it's the tethers, the gravimetric tethers between the planets, and then outside that's the cosmic tethers of the gravity tethers. Because see, and those are the communication lines. So when the CME pops off the sun, it travels through that gravimetric tether between us and the sun. Okay, so if there's anything in between there, like the moon or like Venus or Mercury, it will eccentricate that, right, or deplete it, right?
Yeah.
So okay, so the astro, that's what I've been teaching Ariel. He's switched over to a Christian thing. He's doing a thing up the East Coast right now. Ariel, my astronomer, because I've deemed it astronomy, because I was teaching him, he's the best astrologer out there as far as reading natal charts and the stars and stuff. But I taught him how to tie the gravimetric tethers in with the astrophysics, and I've taught a lot of you guys some things in the background, and now I think it's time. I don't want to take center stage again because the feds have been up my ass for years, man. And I'm taking care of my mom here, but look, yeah, we're on this threshold, Bernie, Bernard,
Oh, yes, we
Jeremiah,
are.
everybody, and
100%.
and we are the ones manifesting this. It's not about the elite. It's not how much money you got or what you own or if you could drop a fucking nuke on somebody if nuclear weapons even fucking exist at this point. You know what I mean? because we know that nuclear explosions are only capable of detonating upon the correct perigee of the sun and things like that to go off right. If any of this stuff is even real, if the AI hasn't been feeding us fake information since the 80s, bro.
I don't know how much about AI is accurate and stuff, but I just want to finish this clip here as Nassim says.
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
Everything cleaned up, and then it got more accurate, and then we could move on from it. So basically, this is the danger of having you can get the right math with the wrong model. And so anyway, to carry on, basically at the beginning of the paper, we make that statement.
Yeah.
We're not talking about a spring with a weight. We're talking about a spinner,
Yeah.
so that we understand that spin is involved. And the free parameter or the fudge factor that Planck added was this h bar, made it so that the spin, the angular momentum of the little spinner, was quantified, like it's a quanta of energy. And that he didn't like, because it was like, it meant that the little oscillator, it was emitting packets of energy in the electromagnetic field, that the electromagnetic field was quantized. And that was the start of quantum theory. And eventually Einstein said, oh, those packets are probably the little packets that are knocking the electrons out in the photoelectric effect. So he wrote a paper on this and got the Nobel Prize for it. So he didn't get the Nobel Prize for relativity. He got the Nobel Prize for actually, some of the first equations of quantum mechanics. But
all this is important to say.
yeah, it's important to understand. And so and the part that's not really well understood neither is that as Max Planck, so he wrote his first equation for the black body radiation and put H in there and got the right answers, right, for the spectrum of light in the 1900, right? So the year 1900, he wrote this equation. By 1912, he had tried to figure out what these equations were saying about the energy of the oscillator, like the internal energy of the oscillator, right? The way the oscillator is emitting and absorbing photons, but as well, like its internal energy. And when he was writing those equations, there was something weird that happened to his graph, which was frequency against temperature. When he put the temperature of the equation at 0 Kelvin, which is super cold, right? It's like it's minus 270 some Celsius, right? It's seriously cold. Where the oscillator should be frozen. There should be no thermal emission. There should be no thermodynamic electromagnetic radiation. Well, the equation said that there was an infinite amount of energy. And that's why he called it 0-point energy. At 0 Kelvin, there's still oscillation. There's still energy. The thing, you can't reach zero energy. It doesn't get there. It always has energy, and the mode of oscillation go towards infinity. The equation diverges to infinity. There's an infinite amount of energy at the.
All right, so that's some key points by Nassim there, specifically stating on where the term 0-point energy originally came from, and out of when you get to 0 degrees Kelvin or absolute zero, that there is still.
But did you see the article the other day about they're making light photons out of nothing? Right? They're generating light out of nothingness. There's this article out, and like that blonde has any idea what he's talking about in the first place.
I'm
But yeah,
not sure if I've
but
seen that.
you did not see that article? You need to go look at that article, bro. They're generating light photons out of nothingness, and this all has to do with CERN getting up to its uh, uh, 8,000 teraelectron volt critical mass, where it will pull the moon down on us if they do that. Dennis Nagel told me about the VLF and the CERN Vistar site years ago when I was doing earthquake forecasting groups on Facebook and networking on Facebook. I'm not only a political news guy, I've been metaphysical my whole life before I got into politics. But yeah, the, the lasers and everything. If you guys don't have like a green laser, like a real cheap laser pointer, and you can amplify it with lenses, all kinds of plastic or glass lenses, it will. You call these ships down. We don't have to make them. You call them down, they'll come pick you up. Green lasers, and Morse code. Anyway,
I might have actually personally experimented with such things, with connecting CE5 and green lasers and seeing
exactly.
well, it's an experience you got to do for yourself. Stuff in the
Yeah, on
sky
that null
that was
school,
not acting normal, that's for sure.
what
Nothing
you've got
landed.
pulled up there, go to the North Pole where the wind right there is zero factoring in. And if you want to change stuff up, you go to that Earth tab on the bottom left, and you can change the particulates and the stuff. Well, just leave it right there for now. Really, leave it right there for now, and explore that later. But go to the North Pole and see where it zoom in a little bit. Go to the North Pole, and after that, after you'll see it at the North Pole, you'll see it at the South Pole. But it vortexes in to a circle. And at 2030 a channel, he says it's been doing that since he's been monitoring null school. So there's a vortex right north of Greenland. North of Greenland is the North Pole, at the very North Pole on the map. You have to let it load up. There's a circle at the very North Pole on the map. So vortex is in at the North Pole, and it vortexes in at the South Pole too. And he says, why is the wind vortexing in? So the South Pole is right at that left arm tip, right up a little bit, right there to the right, somewhere right there is the South Pole. If you zoom in, there will be a circle where the wind vortexes in. You see it? See it? You see it? It's exactly North and South Pole, right there, right there. See it? There it is. And it's a half moon shape, right? And it's there. It's been there on the South Pole, and it's been there on the North Pole the whole time. So this, you'll have to dig into how they monitor that. Yeah. So the Earth is a toroid. The Earth is toroidal. There is a distinct North and South pole to the Earth, like into Algartha and stuff, right? It's visible, right? And there it is. There it is. Boom, shakalaka, like Stephen Burns says, right? It's there all the time. How is that possible? And it's there right north of Greenland down the North Pole too. And I don't know if it's vectoring in clockwise or counterclockwise. I forgot to check it earlier, but I just seen that on Adapt 2030. He pointed that out, and he was like, "What's up with this?" And I was like, "I know what's up with that. The Earth is a toroid. All
Ha-
the same with all the rest of the planets.
Have you
It's
read
got to be."
Have you read Admiral E. Byrd's diary about entering the
My
center?
grandpa was a World War II bomber pilot. He told me about gremlins and stuff. So, uh, and his neighbor developed a water engine that was driving through Joplin, Missouri, and the feds came and took his what it is the combustion, the spark plugs, right? Took the spark plug, basically it's a modified spark plug to run these water engines, and took them, and he said they
Wow.
said if you yeah
Was
if
I
you
muted the whole time, or were you guys
if
hearing me?
no, you were muted. If
Oh
you
god.
reproduce this, your family, we're going to off your family, and that was up in north of Joplin, my grandpa's dairy farm, and his
Oh, I
neighbor.
can't believe I was muted. I was quite astounded by the fact that on both the north and the south, and that they're going clockwise. And
Right. So how does this? Where's
right
that?
on.
Where's that wind information
That's
coming from?
all hollow Earth confirmed, toroid Earth confirmed. I'm sorry though, I have to end it right now, just before it gets to the 2-hour point.
Right.
Love
And
you
they,
all.
Bernie, hey, bro, don't mind the vans and the shit.
You crazy mother. Yeah.
It's just Bernie.